If you're a fellow 90s kid who grew up in a family with even the slightest interest in either motorcycles or the budding new form of TV known as reality television, there's a good chance you were exposed to this show, American Choppers. For me, this show, alongside shows like Home Improvement, were entirely too formative. I like to think that the Tuttles really taught me how to communicate and handle conflict well. Though the fall of American Choppers was quite public, it's actually somewhat difficult to piece together the full story of what really happened, how American Choppers and Orange County Choppers came to be, and what really went wrong. On the one hand, there's the 2008 book written by the Tuttles, telling the story from their perspective. By the way, this book was published less than a year before Sr. would rather publicly fire Paul Jr., and things would really begin to go downhill. And the book itself it's got a lot of bloviating and what you'd expect. It's a tale of greed and betrayal and generational trauma and, most important, wacky freaking motorcycles. So sit back, grab a small cup of coffee or Mountain Dew or some sort of strong alcohol, whatever your beverage of choice may be, and let's dive into the strange and wonderful world of early 2000s choppers and reality TV. Orange County Choppers and the American Choppers TV show wasn't the first reality program centered around the building of extreme custom motorcycles. Part of the reason Paul Sr. took on the offer to make the show was because of the success he'd seen in Jesse James' similar programs called Motorcycle Mania and Monster Garage over at Discovery Channel. At this time, two very interesting and equally ridiculous worlds were colliding: the world of power choppers and reality TV. I've documented the history of choppers in my video on their rise and fall in popularity. At this time, what could be called power choppers were at the forefront, though many of the more underground classic builders never had much love for these more garish and gaudy styled bikes. These motorcycles featured large, powerful modern V-twin engines and huge rear tires. They had elaborate over-the-top paint jobs and often highly customized frames. Despite having an increase in power, they were actually much less rideable than their simpler and older chopper counterparts. But our story all begins with this guy, Paul Tuttle Sr. He details in his book his life growing up. He came from a long line of builders and workers, men and women who did stuff with their hands, started businesses, and yelled a lot. And that's exactly what Paul set out to do. That is, start a business, not yell a lot. Though yelling would come with the territory. Paul Sr.'s first business was creatively named Paul's Welding. Honestly, it's a good name for that kind of business. But this would grow into a large, successful enterprise known as Orange County Iron Works. This company was really the foundation of his career as a businessman and metal worker. Over time, Paul became known for his craftsmanship, particularly his ability to design and build using steel, a skill that would transition well into the world of custom motorcycle building. Orange County Iron Works was a success, but Paul's real passion at this time was motorcycles. He spent his free time building custom bikes and riding them. His bike building was initially just done for fun, but as his designs started getting attention, he realized that there was actually a market for custom choppers. By the late 1990s, with his ironworks business stable and himself sober, Paul Tuttle Sr. saw an opportunity to turn his hobby into a business. In 1999, he founded Orange County Choppers in Montgomery, New York. The name was inspired by the same Orange County in the name of his steel business, as it referenced the county in upstate New York where they were based. If you're like me, you may have thought that Orange County Choppers was based in Orange County, California, but now looking back, it's pretty clear that these are New Yorkers, and it's pretty clear it's definitely not set in California. OCC really started small, with Paul Sr. building custom motorcycles, often heavily inspired by the chopper culture of the 60s and 70s. At this point, his bikes weren't so elaborate, and his personal bike, the Sunshine Bike, really shows this more subdued approach to building custom choppers. In '99, Paul Sr. set out to use chopper building as a way to build his relationship with his son, and also as a side hustle, and their first bike, True Blue, was unveiled at the 1999 Daytona Biketoberfest. And this was a relatively wild chopper, but still very much in that old style. At first, Orange County Choppers was a niche operation. It wasn't like they'd built hundreds of bikes before being approached to make American choppers. The Ironworks shop was the real moneymaker at this point. But a little-known network called Discovery, already making waves in this reality TV fad, wanted another motorcycle program, and they saw the potential in this New York family just as much because of their big, brash personalities as their motorcycle building skills. Discovery reached out to Paul with the idea of a program where each episode they would go to a junkyard, get some sort of trash motorcycle, and make something cool out of it. But Paul didn't like this idea. He wanted the show to feature his builds. So Discovery moved on to another family builder, only to come back to OCC last minute, relenting and letting the Tuttles build their bikes for the show. Now, American Choppers was an instant success because it ended up having the perfect episodic formula, a themed bike that was crazy and interesting, featuring all the problems faced along the way, built by the most New York family you'd ever seen, who only knew how to communicate through yelling. Rewatching that first episode is fascinating, and it's really important for the history of reality TV, if you care about the history of reality TV. American Choppers essentially created the soon-to-be contrived and overused formula of drama and constant business problems and, of course, deadlines. But for American Choppers, it felt somewhat real, unlike other popular shows that would come afterward. The original pilot was a 2-episode special. They then transitioned into a full season. The drama may have been what kept many watching at this time, drama that always ended with some sort of resolution of them going and bowling or some random activity to burn off steam. But for me, the appeal was these incredible two-wheeled creations. These bikes got more and more ridiculous season by season as they tried to up the ante, but in particular the sweet spots were often when they would take a break from the themed bikes and do customer builds. I love the episodes about Cody's old school chopper. Here you get to see that these guys were really motorcycle people. They loved bikes, not just choppers. They go around and look at old Harleys and Triumphs and Indians, and this chopper that they built was meant to pay homage to those iconic bikes from the 60s and 70s, like the ones featured in Easy Rider. And Cody would stay with American Choppers till he would leave to work at Vinnie's shop. More on that later. But that bike is just beautiful and classic. I mean, I would ride that thing. And Paul Sr. giving him the bike at the end is one of those awesome moments in OCC. If you look past the part where Sr. keeps acting like Cody is the child that he wished he had instead of Paulie, that's not great. Now, I want to cover some of the more outlandish builds from American Chopper, 3 in particular, that I think didn't really age well. Though Junior often was able to look at a theme and implement it into a motorcycle pretty well, some of their bikes were criticized for being over-the-top, gaudy, impractical, often leaning too far into flashy gimmicks rather than really nice, cohesive designs. And here are 3 of the most widely criticized and least popular builds. First, we have the Lincoln Mark LT bike, and this was built as a tie-in with Ford's luxury truck, but it really missed the mark for many viewers. The bike was visually cluttered with an oversized front fairing and a bulky rear fender. It was overly chromed and packed with Lincoln branding everywhere, giving it a bloated, almost unwieldy appearance. The bike didn't evoke the ruggedness or luxury that it was supposed to represent and felt more like a marketing tool, which a lot of their bikes did, than a serious custom chopper. Then there's the Snap-on Tools bike, which was intended to celebrate the brand's long-standing relationship with mechanics, but instead kind of became a symbol of excess. OCC loaded the bike with unnecessary tool-themed elements, oversized bolts incorporated into the design. The theme really felt forced, with gaudy chrome everywhere and a paint job that bordered on cartoonish. The bike looked more like a parade float than something you'd want to ride. And then number 3, the Ferrari bike, my personal favorite disaster build. Built for a high-profile customer in 2007, the Ferrari bike was intended to pay homage to the Italian supercar brand. While it was an ambitious project, it ended up being one of the most criticized bikes OCC ever built. Instead of capturing Ferrari's sleek, refined aesthetic, the way that companies like Ducati and MV Agusta kind of do, the bike came across as awkward. The large, bulky bodywork and excessive use of Ferrari emblems made it feel more like a caricature of the brand rather than a tribute, which is really what would often happen when these bikes went wrong. It lacked the elegance and sophistication Ferrari's known for. The bike had a massive exhaust pipe on the one side and huge, gaudy air intake on the other, which really detracted from the clean, flowing lines that are typical of a Ferrari. It felt like OCC went overboard with unnecessary elements just to make the bike stand out. Like many of OCC's themed bikes, the Ferrari chopper was more of a showpiece than something you'd actually want to ride. The design was clunky, the handling seemed to be kind of awkward, and a lot was sacrificed in the name of aesthetics. Now, though drama was the key to the show's success, there was one guy who really avoided it all at all costs. As the show carried on, it became clear that Paul Jr. was the creative mind behind the designs, and another character named Vinnie was probably the most talented builder and fabricator. Vincent Vinnie DiMartino was a key part of the show. His first appearance on the show was in 2003, and he quickly became a fan favorite because of his easygoing personality and his impressive fabrication skills. Vinny was often seen working alongside Paulie, and he was one of the shop's most talented mechanics and fabricators. He was really pivotal. He helped make some of their most iconic bikes, one being the Fire Bike, which was built to honor the firefighters who lost their lives in 9/11. This build showcased his craftsmanship with its custom fire hydrant themed air filter, intricate gas tank, and amazing paintwork. And this is one of OCC's most famous tribute bikes. Their tribute bikes often were better pulled off than just the theme bikes. Then there was the Comanche bike. This build paid tribute to the US military with the bike's design inspired by the Boeing RAH-66 Comanche helicopter. And Vinny played a key role in assembling this really complex bike, which was packed with military details like missile-shaped exhaust pipes and a rotor blade style fender. And then there was Mikey's old school bike. This is one that Vinny was really involved in. The old school chopper design was just really well done. But then in 2007, Vinny left OCC to start his own shop, V-Force Customs, and his departure was a big moment in American chopper history, as many fans had grown attached to just his steady presence in the often chaotic OCC environment. He later returned to the spotlight when he joined Paul Jr. Designs, reuniting with Paulie after the famous Tuttle family split. Vinny's legacy on American Chopper is really defined by his craftsmanship, his reliability, and just his calm demeanor amidst all the drama. But him leaving OCC towards the end, it really made a statement that the business had sort of hit a wall and the show had kind of hit a wall as well. That and the very public firing of Paul Jr. just highlighted the main problem at OCC, and that was Paul Sr. himself. All the drama, all the fighting, most of it was BS, as with all of these shows, but the reason these guys were so good at pretending to fight over dumb crap is because in reality, they actually did suck at communicating and acting like mature adults, and no one worse than Paul Sr. himself. Then the firing of Paul Tuttle Jr. by his father, Paul Sr. It's easily one of the most explosive moments in reality TV history. It didn't just stir up drama, but completely shifted the dynamic at OCC and the direction of the show itself. The tension between the two had been building for years, and when it finally boiled over, it really messed up their relationship and kind of ruined the business. One thing to understand about the show's dynamics is that Paul Sr. and Paul Jr. were constantly at odds. That was part of the show's charm, but it quickly became apparent that they were actually fighting. Sr. was all about discipline and efficiency and meeting deadlines, whereas Paulie was the creative mind, a bit more relaxed, sometimes showing up late, but always coming through with some of the shop's best designs, and he really did spearhead these incredible bikes. They wouldn't exist without him. But their personalities clashed constantly, and you could see it on screen as they argued over everything from bike designs to work ethic. And then in 2009, the big moment happened. During one of their typical shouting matches, Paul Sr. had had enough of Paul Jr.'s perceived lack of respect and dedication, calling him out mainly for being 45 minutes late. I'm sure most of you, if you're a fan of the show, you've seen this. And what's crazy is that Sr. keeps pointing out that their contract states when Paulie is supposed to be at work and lays out what he's supposed to be doing at specific times, how long his lunch can be. And Jr. rightly points out that he should be a partner at this point, and they shouldn't be worrying about stuff like that. And honestly, he's 100% right. The lack of respect for his son to not have made him partner at this point when he was the show, it's just insane. And how can you expect someone to respect you and your business when you haven't respected what they bring to the table? And then Junior storms out and Senior fires him, and it's a whole thing. Now, TLC actually threatened to cancel the show due to a contract that required both Paul Sr. and Paul Jr. to be involved. Paul Jr. came back briefly as a consultant for OCC, but he officially left in April of 2009 to start his own company, Paul Jr. Designs, and he brought a lot of people with him from OCC. This marked the beginning of the end for American Chopper, which wrapped up its original run with the season 6 finale on February 11th, 2010. Around this time, Paul Sr. tried to use contract terms to buy out Paul Jr.'s 20% ownership in OCC, but he fought back and countersued for fraud. After leaving OCC, Paul Jr. had a 1-year non-compete clause, so during that time he worked on various projects outside of chopper building. But when his clause expired in 2010, he jumped right back into the motorcycle scene, teaming up with his brother Michael and Vinnie DiMartino to get bikes rolling out of his shop again. Now, when you look at the fall of American choppers and OCC really, it's sad, but it's the same as its rise. You know, the fall and the thing that made it all fall apart is the thing that made it popular. A dysfunctional family business dynamic may bring in viewers, but it gets tiring, and as we saw, it can boil over. This is why so many other reality TV shows since then have preferred to basically have entirely fake and silly drama that doesn't actually get people's feelings hurt. Whereas in American Choppers, it was like Senior would just come down and, call Mikey like a fat piece of crap and just be awful to him. Some of it was contrived, but much of it was real, and you can't keep a business, especially a family business, going that way. But let's get to the real problem. And I actually titled this small section, Paul Sr., the ultimate narcissist baby. Because to me, that's what Paul Sr. clearly was and is. A giant, selfish baby who expects everyone around him to cater to him and his ways, but he cannot handle any pushback, and he's unwilling to actually acknowledge that other people, and his own kid namely, had, more talent and skill and creative vision than he. And there's nothing worse than a dad who can't handle that their son is better than them at something. And the recent somewhat fake feud between him and that guy from Bikes and Beards, I don't know. It looks like he's softened up a little bit, but it doesn't seem like he's changed. This is someone who is exactly what he claims to see and hate in everyone else. He's unwilling to hear criticism, he's stubborn and arrogant, and he's got main character syndrome. Everything revolves around him. And I'm sure making him the star of a reality TV show didn't help with that main character syndrome. Just go watch a few episodes of American Chopper and then imagine what life was probably like after the cameras were turned off. Maybe it was all hunky-dory, but I'm pretty sure we know at this point that it wasn't. You don't fire your son on public television and then not talk to them for years and then have them go on to start their own competing business. None of that was fake. And I'm sorry, but I'm still Team Junior, okay? There's an old video from about 6 years ago where Vinnie is doing a Q&A, talking about if he's still in contact with the guys from OCC, and for the most part, he's cool with everyone, and yet he says absolutely nothing about Senior. Absolutely nothing. It's kind of one of those, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all mentality. I don't think he has anything nice to say, and coming from him, I don't know, it means a lot. And then watching that moment where Senior comes over and visits Junior's shop and just kind of trashes his bike, I just don't get it. As a father, sure, my sons aren't adults yet, but you have to be able to put your ego aside sometimes, and he seems incapable of doing that. And his son ends up having to be the bigger man often and show him how to act like a decent person and a decent father. But let's talk about motorcycles for a bit. Looking back at this show and the builds from OCC and taking everything in context, these kinds of choppers were very much a symbol of the kind of excess that we were experiencing in America in the early 2000s prior to the recession in 2007. Anybody who just blatantly says that all of the OCC bikes are crap probably hasn't watched the show. Yes, it's true, they weren't meant to be touring bikes. OCC, like so many other shops making custom choppers, they prioritized form over function. They were meant to be pieces of art more than they were, super functional motorcycles. Sure, some of the bikes were pretty awful, but between Paul Jr. and Vinnie, and also Rick, we haven't mentioned him, they were incredibly talented and skilled. I'd like to see you build a motorcycle from the ground up week after week. It's impressive, and it was really fun watching them come up with these insane designs that did create lots of difficulties for making a motorcycle that actually moves and works. Most full-blown manufacturers who make insane custom concept bikes don't even make ones that run. OCC did, and yeah, they were probably unreliable and uncomfortable, but that's not the point. All I'm saying is that we need to be balanced. American Choppers wasn't primarily for motorcyclists. The vast majority of viewers didn't even ride. Most of the bikes were cool even if they weren't the kind of motorcycles you'd want to ride, and they were very much indicative of that time. The kinds of choppers that were popular, that's what they were building, and they were pretty cool. I say all that though, and then I look at the Ferrari bike, and not good. Well, I'd love to hear from you guys. Did you watch American Choppers? What do you think of choppers in general, and specifically these kinds of choppers? And if you want to learn more about chopper history, check out this video I have popping up right here. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next one. Ride safe.